Hey, it's Anthony Meisner with Plans. How do I came to bring you your Greater Metro Denver update for the month? Let's dive right in. Here we're standing here in April, looking back into March, and really what we've seen is this increase in buyer demand slightly, right? 2.99% more under contracts are taking place. The active units have slipped down a little bit over a year ago, but clearly they're still rising in their seasonal trend, which is a good sign. And average sold price is looking a little bit better, 2% up, which is a good sign as well. All right, let's dive a little bit into some of the details. What does that look like? Active units, 9,300 units on the market. Yes, that's a little elevated from where we were previously, but still right in line with where we were a month ago. There is a lot coming on the market though, so be cautious with this one. We will see that huge seasonal rise in inventory like we always do. Now, if you look at it by my location, Douglas County has had the most increase in active units. Adams County down 8% in active units, but still right in that same vein that you would expect to see. The new listings, though, this is brand new stuff coming to market in the month of March. And we had a lot of units, right? Outside of last year, we really have seen the most we've seen in a while. This is very similar to the 22 numbers, which is kind of interesting, but only a few hundred units below where we saw last year. That's 20% increase month over month, right? We're starting to really see that, active listing season take place. So that's interesting to watch. Now, place like Elbert County has had not nearly as many come on the market. Arapahoe County, same thing, minus 10% there. If you look at the month supply of inventory, this is really what tells you, is it going to be buyer favored or seller favored? Is it a good time to be a seller? Is it not, right? So when we're looking at 2.1 months of inventory, it's very similar to where it was a year ago. It was still in March was a really good time to be a seller, right? There's plenty of buyers out there looking, not an overwhelming amount of inventory to compete with, but it didn't mean you didn't have to do it right. Now, clearly, the tightest part of this market is that Jefferson County market at 1.9 months, up to the most amount of inventory in Elbert County like we generally see. You look at it in the attached market, though, this is so different. The condo townhouse market has been experiencing just not enough buyers out there, and inventory is continuing to rise again for multiple years in a row now, but we're up to almost 5 months of inventory in March. So watch out here. This is going to rise just like everywhere else through most of the year. And it's just a really tough market, especially in the city of Denver. 6.2 months of inventory there. There's just not enough buyers and a ton of inventory in the market. This is what leads to price decreases, right? Because you just have so many sellers and not enough buyers in that marketplace. And, you get into somewhere like Broomfield where maybe things will be fairly stable, right? Only 3.5 months of inventory. Yes, it might still take a little while to sell, but it's not completely out of balance like you'd see in Denver. Now, days in MLS by detached single family, we saw 44. It tends to trend down later into the year, but it is faster, right? Significantly faster than it was last month. And we're right around where we were a year ago with an increase in inventory level. It just goes to show you, those better listings, the stuff with good locations, they're really dialed in and buttoned up. They are going under contract faster than everything else. If you look at the attached market, we still really feel the same thing too, where, even though we had so much inventory, the stuff that's good seems to be going under contract in a couple of months, only 63 days average right now. So really keep your eye on that. And I think the big tail there is if you're not getting enough showing traffic, or, it's clearly probably a price issue in so many ways, right? Even though we thought it might be worth something, there's just so much to compete with that if it's not buttoned up, people just aren't even hardly looking, which is tough. Now, if you look at the actives and the solds by price range, this tells us a little bit of a different story, right? Interest rates have been a lot better this year for most of the year up until the war in Iran. It would be interesting to see with the ceasefire what's happening there and if that kind of comes back down because buyer demand is so tied to payment, right? And so I think the interesting part here is you're seeing a lot of solds by price range. You're seeing most of those solds taking place lower in the market, but there's a big number of sales, way more than usual, taking place in that 1 to 2 million range. So that's 19% above what we saw this time last year. It's been an interesting one to watch. So watch what's happening. 600 to a million, though, is down just a little bit. So keep your eye on that market. That's a very rate sensitive portion of the market. Now, attached, this is a tough one to swallow because, yes, some of the higher end stuff seems to be doing fairly well. 600 to a million in the attached market. There's still, some sales taking place, 10% more than this time last year in many ways. But everything under 600,000, it's crickets, right? Minus 15% solds. That's a tough market. And if you compare that with the active units on the other side of the chart, you've seen the unit numbers ramp up. So it's a really difficult market in the attached market for most product, right? Now, month supply of inventory like we talked about, this is what really tells you if your seller's favored. If you're under 600,000, hell, you're even under about a million, you're in that 2 to 3 or, 1 to 2 months of inventory window, 2.3 for 800 to a million. And that really leads you to believe the sellers still have the upper hand in those parts of the market. As long as they're selling a good product, it seems to be going quickly. Now, you get to 1 million, you get 3 months of inventory, probably feels more balanced. You get to 2 million, you start to really see buyers have the upper hand. And of course, the ultra luxury or over 3 million really sheds light on just how much more product out there. And just, not very many buyers qualify for that. And a lot of those are going for cash anyway. So it's a very different type of market up there in luxury. But you can see from the other side of the chart, the days on market, that it's just all moving fairly rapidly, right? I mean, basically 40-ish days, 40 to 50 days across most of these price ranges. So that's a good sign to see that, people are still engaging with all parts of the market. The attached market, on the other hand, we're looking at that 60, 70 days in MLS, and we have just so much inventory. So of course, the luxury market is acting similar to the detached luxury market, but most of that market is really in that window where buyers have the huge upper hand in this negotiation. And, 4 or 5 months of inventory, there's a lot to choose from. They can absolutely be very picky. So it's interesting to watch that. If we look at the average sold price, this is our detached single family. You can see year over year, we're at 0.6% above where we were last year. So things are super flat, right? Very stable. Clearly, we see a seasonal cycle if you look at the graph up there, but we're just plugging along right where we were a year ago, nothing out of the ordinary, but really no price appreciation or depreciation across most markets. So keep your eyes on that. The other part of the market is the attached market, and this one has been a little volatile. It's kind of bounced all over the place. Good news for the last month, though, is that they're up 4.9%, and 4.9% is a really healthy number to see as we saw so much settling in the price over the last few years. Be optimistic to keep it there. I think this is kind of a high month. We'll probably see it continue to bounce around as there's just not enough buyers in that marketplace. Okay, sold units by detached single family. You can see that, we've off to a good start for the year. January is a little slow because of December last year going under contract, but really off to the races this year as we are truly getting more under contract than we had the prior year. So far, year over year, we're at, 5% up. Year to date, we kind of compensated for that slow start in January with closings, but we really are about flat with where we were a year ago. Of course, you can see at the bottom, if you're looking at any of the other cities, certain ones have done better than others. Elbert's been quite a bit slower. Douglas County's been quite a bit slower at minus 7.5%, but places like Jefferson County and Arapahoe County have really done quite a bit more volume. So that's good to see. The attached market, this really just paints that picture of, how much slower things are again in another year of a tough attached market. So you can see year to date, we're down about 12% in sales. Sold to list price doesn't always tell us the full story here because it doesn't include price drops or concessions, but it is worth at least noting to see what the trend is. And the trend across detached single family is that buyers are slightly more in favor than they were a year ago by 0.2%. So it's still a very healthy market, 99.3% list to sell price. And that's kind of what I've got to share with you today. If you need other information or have other questions on the market, please reach out. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'll catch you next time.